let's take something like this and make some cutting boards. End grain cutting boards, in fact. However, I've never made cutting boards before, and I don't have a drum sander, so let's see how that goes. Spoiler. Now to start off with, I'm going to cut down some strips from this oak and walnut, cutting some to length here just to make it easier to manage, and starting off with the bandsaw for the oak boards, cutting some strips from those. And also one thing with the oak that I'm doing here is that I'm sorting through it a bit to make sure that I'm getting clean boards, because I'm using some oak that had some wormholes in it. I got a cheaper price for it, but all you could just do is work around those wormholes and you get some really good oak from it. And for the walnut boards, I decided to use the table saw instead of the bandsaw to rip the strips. I've never worked with walnut before, so I wanted to see how it worked really with the different tooling. So trying out some different methods for the different boards. And now for some surface prep on the jointer to get some good glue surface areas. And finishing up on the planer, get the opposite side nicely. Then I'm going through the strips, just looking at the end grain patterns, seeing if there's something that stands out, that just what looks visually pleasing. And in the end, I found something that looked alright. I probably spent a bit more time thinking about the placement of those strips than I needed to. And yeah, of course, next step is the glue up. And the glue I'm using is Type On 3. And then we finish up this glue up with some percussive persuasion to make sure the boards lay nice and flat, or the strips, I should say. Next up, the walnut board. At this point, I had received some new clamps. The shipment of these was a bit delayed, so I didn't have them for the oak glue up, but that one went fine anyway, but I got to use the new clamps on the walnut board.
Liksom bara trycka in.
Ja, vi trycker ihop dem. Och sen när limmet torkar, då sitter de fast.
Ingen får röra.
Nej, så nu får de här ligga här ett tag. And thanks to my 4-year-old for some background commentary just there. And here we have the walnut blank in clamps. Giving it a day, and then we're unclamping the oak board and putting it through the planer. Looking really nice here, I think. For the oak board, I am using a planer, not a planer sled, but I'm using a table saw sled to cut it into strips. Just have to make sure it's supported at the end there, so make it easier to handle, and some wax on it to get it sliding nice and well. This little table saw really is maxing out this table saw for a kind of crosscut like this. Need to build some different kind of sled if I want to do some wider pieces here. But it worked out fine. The blade did leave some tear out here, but it wasn't something that was hard to clean up with a sandpaper and some filing work. Now, I didn't do any calculations beforehand to see how much I needed for this, so I just winged it really, and turned out I had enough to make 2 boards from here. You can see the first one glued up at the top there. And yeah, at either end you can see some pine. There's a sacrificial planing thing, so we get less tear out. And yeah, also this is before I got the new clamps, but it worked out fine. Now here is the walnut. I decided to cut this on the miter saw, so I did a little setup test and I got a perfectly parallel cut, so that worked out nicely. And yeah, just continue cutting out the strips. I actually have more crosscut capacity here than I did with the planing, no, again, planing sled, but I meant the table saw sled. So yeah, I'm just continue cutting these out. And this walnut is looking really nice. I'm really glad I have some more of it for another project coming up soon, so. And here's a shot of the zero clearance setup I did for the miter saw and the nice dust collection in the background. Here I'm gluing it up, and as you can tell, it's different from the oak board. It's the new clamps, but I also forgot to put the sacrificial box on there, so I'm gonna have to sort that out later. And once the glue is dried, come back and take it off the clamp. Then we scrape off some excess glue squeeze out to make planing it easier. And then we need to solve the issue of those sacrificial boards. I'm doing that with some super glue and the spray activator. It worked out nicely. Plenty strong enough to do the planing. And speaking of planing, so here's me planing the walnut board. And I did not film the oak board, so you're just gonna have to imagine this, but with the oak board instead. So pretty much the same thing, just very shallow passes. Few passes might have been too heavy accidentally, but yeah. First time doing this, so give me some slack. I think it worked out nicely in the end. Now, I wasn't really sure how the best way to square up the side here, because I did not do a good job aligning it when gluing, or I didn't do a good enough job, but I just took the easy way for me at the time anyway, to take a track saw and just make a mark and do a cut. It worked out nicely. And then I used the table saw to cut the opposite side parallel to the first. The sacrificial ends to cut off on the miter saw. Along with this, it is time for a lot of sanding. I did do some tear with the planing, but sanding it worked out nicely. So sanding the sides here, and after that I'm routing some tiny roundovers along the edge of it. I think this is a 16th inch roundover bit. I just used a sander to do the corners rounding here, so probably use a routing jig if I were to do more of them or sell them. Now I am marking and routing some slots for the handles or finger pulls using a rabbiting bit. Nothing special there. And time to get the feet attached. So I decided to use the Forstner bit to set these into the board a little bit so it doesn't sit too high above the desk, but it still gives the height above the desk, or the countertop, I should say. But hey, I mean, you can use a cutting board on your desk if you want to. I don't judge. Then I did some halfway freehand juice grooves on the walnut board. I chose not to use the juice groove on the oak board, but decided to go for it with the walnut board. Probably build a proper jig for it next time, but this worked out pretty good. Just a few burn marks, but sanding those out by hand, tedious, but yeah, got most of them out. I could get some of the juice groove sanding done with a power sander, but most of it I had to do by hand. And then finally, time for some finish. So I'm using just some cutting board oil here, linseed oil based. And the brand I'm using is Hozon Finishes cutting board oil. It's a Swedish brand, almost locally produced to where I live. Yeah, filling in all the nooks and crannies with oil, and leaving a heavy coat here for the end grain to suck in. Coming back a bit to wipe it clean, or wipe it dry. And the next day I am using some cutting board wax, also from Hozon Finishes. And before I turn it over to do the wax on the top side, I attach the feet finally. Now, time for the wax for the top side. Applying it and then buffing it with a piece of cotton. Now, I'm really quite happy with the end results, and I think it turned out quite well. The oak board that I started with looks really nice, and I think the walnut board looks amazing. There's one banana, however. I'm not sure how that happened, considering the near identical one is still straight. You can't have everything. And what I do have, I'm really happy with, especially considering this is the first time making end grain cutting boards, or cutting boards at all for that matter. Now, the rest of this video is going to be me rambling away for a few minutes about a few takeaways I have from this project. I get it if you don't stick around for that, and in that case, thanks for watching this far. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up button on your way out if you found any of this interesting. Now, let's get back to that banana-shaped board. I'm really unsure how this happened. This is made from the same oak strips as the other board is. It was processed at the same time throughout the project, the same way, stored the same, all of that. But somehow, it bowed a lot. I mean, it was straight coming out of the glue up. It was straight when I put oil on it. But the day after I put oil on it, yeah, it's like this. As for the other one, it's been about a week now and it's still straight. So I think it will probably stay that way. In the end, I don't think it matters that much. This is the first time doing a thing. It should be expected that not everything goes well. And to be honest, I was half prepared going into this that I would have to scrap all of it. So getting 2 out of 3 boards from this project, that's a success in my book. Now, from some angles, there are some very visible lines in the oak cutting board. The walnut board also had some very visible planing marks, but those sanded out pretty well. Granted, I did have to sand a lot. I think for the oak board, they probably would have sanded out if I was more persistent, so that's something to keep in mind for next time. In the end, using a planer for end grain cutting boards worked out well. I do have a helical head in this planer, but that still requires very shallow passes to reduce tear out. Obviously, I wasn't able to eliminate tear out entirely, but I was able to minimize it. Granted, if I had a drum sander, it would have helped with that, but I don't see fitting one of those into my budget anytime soon. As you can tell, I opted to not put any juice grooves on the oak board here, but I did do that for the walnut board, and I think it turned out nicely. I would definitely build a jig if I were to make more cutting boards, But using the edge guide on the router worked pretty well actually. I do have 2 corners where I went a tiny bit too far, but it's not something that really stands out on the board. The routing did leave a bunch of burn marks, especially in the corners where I slowed down a lot. And it took a lot of sanding to get that out, and I didn't even get all of it. Once oiled, those burn marks actually kind of disappeared in some places. So we'll see how this ages again, if the burn marks become more visible as the oil washes out of the board. So we'll have to wait and see. And it's not something that is obvious and sticks out when you look at the board. Now, if you watched all of this, well done and thank you. It means a lot to me. I'm still getting a hang of this YouTube thing, so bear with me while I figure things out. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you're interested in more woodworking, garden woodworking, furniture building, just behind the camera is a wall cabinet that's almost finished, and I should have that up within a week or so. So stay tuned for that.